Hey, what's up everyone? David Staub here. I am absolutely ecstatic to talk to you all this evening. I am here with my absolutely lovely wife, Megan.
Hey, y'all.
She's not going to be talking as much on this podcast tonight, but I'm going to be getting her opinion on a few things as she was a large part of watching everything we're going to be talking about tonight. I am discussing alcohol addiction. As you know, the Maegical Stories of Healing podcast, we're going to be interviewing people from all over the world that had stories of natural healing, divine healing, organic natural ways of healing. And we went over Megan's, and now it is my turn as the thing that my vice for the far majority of my life was unfortunately alcohol addiction. It plagued me for years and years. And to be clear, it wasn't the kind that because there's a couple different kinds of alcohol addiction out there. It wasn't the kind that I needed it every day, but it was the kind where I could not just have one drink. I would have to have 10, 15, and so on and so forth. So I'm excited to talk to you all about this for a few reasons, man. I strongly in my heart, I feel addiction is one of the biggest issues out there in America right now. Not that many people talk about it because there's this horrible stigma around it. And it's so unfortunate because the statistics alone say 1 out of every 7 people in America deal with addiction, some kind of substance abuse. But I honestly think it's more than that because people don't speak about addiction. They're, because we're so conditioned for being worried about what people think, people are afraid to bring it up, especially men. There's a pretty big population of men out there that think they're too macho and tough to be talking about their addiction issues, which couldn't be further from the truth. But addiction, it doesn't discriminate. Men, women, ethnicity, anything, it's out there. And with the way our brains are created, if we focus on any one thing, just about anything you can be addicted to, whether you're talking about alcohol, drugs, sex, technology, really anything, it can become an addiction. So I'm excited to talk to you all about it because I feel it's so incredibly important. And I think that addiction is gone about completely wrong in our society. And again, I want to preface this with, I don't have all the answers by any means. I can only tell you about my experience and what worked for me. But I ended up through a few different ways and a huge testimony to Megan for how instrumental she was in this process for multiple ways. And I'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation, but kind of came up with a pretty unique way of how I overcame my alcohol addiction. And it couldn't be further from anything that society tried to help me with. And again, I want to be clear throughout this episode, I'm not knocking it if it works for someone else, because there are some people it works for, which is great. I just ask everyone to reflect and be very self-aware and honest with yourself if it is working for you, or if it's not. So anyway, let's get to it. Alcohol is always my vice. I mean, it always has been. Like I said, I couldn't just have one drink. It had to be 10 to 15. And I tried all of society's ways to overcome it, and nothing worked. I'm going to discuss the unique way that I was able to overcome my addiction. But first off, I'd like to kind of get Megan. Megan is in a unique position because we were friends for a few years. Then we started dating. Then obviously got married, and she saw me through from the beginning, whenever I was deep into my addiction, through the middle, the transition, the attempting to stop, all the way to the end when I overcame it. I've been sober for years now. So, Megan, what would you say was the first time you kind of noticed that there was something wrong, or what were some of the signs that gave you that idea?
For the longest time, we worked for different companies, but we were always at these medical software trade shows, and we all had this big group of friends, and so we'd always see each other. And I mean, everyone, there drank a lot and partied, it seemed like. So you just kind of blended in with everyone for a while. And then it was whenever I actually got recruited to go work for your company. And then we were, working closely together, obviously. And so I remember being at trade shows, and during the break time, you'd want to go straight to the bar, in the middle of the day and just drink. And even if it was just like wine, but like you would down wine. I'm talking, I was just like, what? You were downing it. Yep. And like, I mean, just putting them back. And I was just like, whoa. I was like, there's no way I can do this and go back and talk to doctors, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's something, you know, I've never really understood, but there's something in my brain. And one important part, if you're talking with an addict or someone that has addiction issues, or you yourself do, it's so important to be so hyper self-aware of this stuff. And I could never understand why, but I really have come to the conclusion. I came to the conclusion a long time ago. Something in my brain literally switches whenever I have a drink of alcohol for one reason or another. And yeah, I couldn't just do one. I had to do 10 or 15, and my personality changed. It was pretty intense. So I knew going once it kicked off. I would say my addiction issues really started whenever I was in New York City. In New York, there's this culture of partying up there, and I got heavy into it. We'd party 4, 5, 6 nights a week. And the thing is, it was hidden. A lot of my addiction from the outside, you couldn't always tell, because I was very successful in New York. I worked, like I said, a medical software sales company. I was making 6 figures, but what most people didn't know, I was actually spending the 6 figures on partying and bad decisions. And it was just so unfortunate, and it's a slippery slope. And the problem is, whenever I started drinking and I kept going down that route, for some reason or another, I would turn into a different person. And it was scary. I would never, I would make bad decisions. I became heavily jealous. And I literally only cared about me. Something changed in my mind, and I wasn't like that whenever I was sober. I was, and not trying to just brag on myself, but I was kind and just a genuine person that cared about other people, and just normal. And it just, something changed in my brain when I started drinking, and people started to know it was a little bit of an issue early on. They would say things here and there, but I hid it pretty well. But I started to realize, one thing I do want to note, actually, after doing some introspection down the road on the jealousy, for some reason, I got heavily, heavily jealous when I drank. And I'm so, I want to say I'm ashamed of it, because it's all part of growth, and it's just kind of who I was whenever I drank. But looking back, I think one of the reasons why that was in my subconscious mind, whenever I was a child, I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, my parents went through a really bad divorce. And I'm going to preface this with, my mom's just an incredible woman, love her to death. We have an incredible relationship now, and she's matured so much over the years. I can't say enough great things about her, but she was 18, 17 whenever they had me, and when her and my father were married. And during that marriage, she wasn't faithful during that marriage, but they were so young. Who would be at 17 and 18? No one is ready for any kind of relationship. So I don't blame her for that, nothing. But me being, I was 6, 7 years old when that was going on, and I saw all that and I knew about it. So at that young of an age, when my brain was still processing and like growing and figuring things out, I saw, what's the word I'm looking for? I saw infidelity. And when that happened, that went deep into my subconscious mind. So I always wondered in my teenage years into my 20s why I had like these jealousy issues, and they were just heightened to such a high degree whenever I drank. And that's why, I had to go through and really process that and come to that conclusion. But that's just something interesting to note. Anyone that has these issues that come up when you're drinking, really, I think, one of the commonalities of trauma is going back to that childhood and figuring out what happened and what could be causing it. And once you become aware of that, you can go in and start to heal it. But anyway, going back to the drinking, it was getting really heavy in New York City, and I would party, and I just party way too hard, really spend all my money, kind of become that different bad person that I didn't want to be. I was that guy that was blacking out, not remembering what happened the night before, and it just caused so many issues in every one of my relationships. Because the drinking was always the most important thing to me. And deeper than that, I was always the most important thing to me, which I'll get back to in a second. So anything that is that when you're going down that road, there has to get to some kind of breaking point, which when I'm reflecting upon when that was, it got to the epitome of bad in the relationship that I was in right before Megan. I was dating somebody that, because of how I got when I started drinking, she told me she didn't want me to drink. literally was like, you can't drink if you're going to be with me. So, initially I was like, oh yeah, sure, I won't drink. But obviously that didn't last very long. It forced me to resort to hiding drinking. I would, travel. I traveled all across the United States doing medical software sales, and I'd go out on the weekends and I would just tell her I went to sleep and party and go drink, and again, I'm not proud of any of that, but this is when I still had all those demons, and I wasn't healed, and I still had a lot of growth and a lot of evolving to do. But it got bad because I would go do that consistently, and that wears on your soul, that wears on your heart. And I was literally starting to use drinking as an escape because she got more and more and more controlling. And as she got more controlling, I got super unhappy. And a lot of addiction stems from using some kind of substance as an escape. And that's literally what I started doing to a high degree. I was using it as an escape. I would look forward to every weekend just to get away and drink as much as I could to ignore and get away from the reality I was living in. I was trying to numb myself constantly. And that's when I knew it got really, really bad. I knew I had to change. I knew I had to do something to stop drinking. I was still with this girl. And then we came to the conclusion that I need to do what I have to do to stop drinking. So, of course, what are the first couple things you do? You go, what are society's ways? The first thing I did is I tried an outpatient program. And again, I want to preface this with, I don't want to sound like I'm just kind of trashing society's ways, because I know they work for some people. And I think some of the people there have good intentions, but that could not have been worse for me. I did an entire 13-week outpatient program, and throughout the whole program, it was like they were telling you weren't stronger than this substance. I was told I have to separate myself from alcohol constantly. I have to change every one of my friends. I can't go down the same alleyway as something that has a liquor store. Basically change your entire life. And I was listening to all this, and I didn't really get into my, spiritual awakening and this. I didn't really get into I wasn't at the part of my life really where I knew really what an ego was, but I just knew something within me didn't like that. I didn't like that I was being told that I wasn't strong enough to beat this alcohol issue. So it just didn't work for me. I would leave just depressed and being like, wow, but I tried it. I did try. I went through the whole program. They even had me try like these pharmaceuticals that would have me, they would tell me to take it in the morning. So if I drank later on that day, it would make me throw up, which sounds crazy because if I really wanted to drink, then I just wouldn't take it the morning. I wouldn't take the pill. So I never really quite understood that. But just all of these things that just did not work for me. I even tried AA. I tried AA. I went there, and again, I don't want to come off like I'm trashing it. I know it works for some people, which is fantastic, but it just didn't work for me. I went there and it was incredibly depressing. It was everyone literally talking about and focusing on alcohol. Literally talking about their entire focus was alcohol. Their whole lives revolved around alcohol. This is before I understood the law of attraction. This is before I understood how all that works, how the conscious and subconscious mind works. So I tried AA, went to that a bunch, and I literally just kept resorting back to drinking. I even tried things like every day I would be sober, I'd change the background on my screen to 1 and 2 and 3 just to try and keep it working, and just nothing was working. I later realized it was because I was just focusing on drinking. Like my whole life and days revolved around focusing on drinking, which brings me to what actually did start to work for me. And, again, I'm not saying this works for everyone because this next topic is very controversial. But psychedelics were heavily beneficial for me. I had never done psychedelics before, and they were introduced to me from a friend, and there was all this really good research on it. And there's a company called MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, which is doing all this really promising work with psychedelics in a controlled environment. So I started experimenting with psychedelics. I started experimenting with LSD and mushrooms, and I had just these incredible, beautiful epiphanies while experimenting with LSD specifically. Again, not condoning it, but just telling you my experience and what worked for me. The first big epiphany that I had, and all this is just within myself. The first big epiphany that I had was that I was truly, deeply unhappy, which sounds obvious. I mean, anyone on the outside would be like, yeah, no shit, you're unhappy. You're in a relationship that you're never happy with, and you're binge drinking every chance you get when you're not there. But you'd be surprised. Some people going through the most stuff, it basically, the LSD helped me take a step back, look at my life separated from my life, if that makes sense, and see that, man, I'm so unhappy. And one of the things that was making me so unhappy was being in that relationship. And it wasn't, I'm not trying to put the blame on anything external. I'm not trying to put the blame on that other person, that girl, by any means. We just weren't meant to be together. We were very, very different. I let the relationship go on for way longer than it should have. And it was just such a horribly toxic relationship that it needed to end. But it was so hard to, I don't know, any of you might relate to this, but if you're ever in a relationship and you just let it go for way too long, the longer you let it go for, the more emotional investment you have. And, utilizing psychedelics, going within my mind and looking at what I need to do to be happy, I needed to learn how to love myself, and I needed to really learn more about myself. I wasn't ready for that kind of relationship yet, and she wasn't the right person for me, to be transparent. So the first thing I did was after just a few of these trips, it became so clear what my next step was. I had to end the relationship. So I ended it, cut everything off, and I went out on my own. I was on my own, and I needed some time to really find and discover myself. I continued to experiment with psychedelics for a while, and each time I got a little more clarity and a little more clarity. And I remember this one specific time, and this is going to be hard to explain. I don't want to make this whole podcast about psychedelics, but I remember one time sitting down and going within my mind and really looking at my addiction and fighting with it. Like, why are you the way that you are? Why are you doing this? This is, and I fought with it literally in my mind. And I came out of that, and I just felt a little better about my addiction. So that was a huge part of it. Was the first key piece was the psychedelics. Then I met Megan. I was friends with Megan throughout this process when she was seeing my craziness and all of that. But once we started down the road, I was still trying to battle with this on and off, stop drinking. I had more progress with the psychedelics than anything else. That Megan and I started dating. And, Megan and I started dating, and try not to go off on too much of a tangent here. I can't express how divine it was when we started dating. I feel very, very much like she was sent to me by God. I know that sounds extreme, but it's how I feel. It's unlike any relationship I've ever had in my life, and you just kind of know. So that happened, and something shifted within myself, which is important. At that point, for the first time ever, something became more important to me than myself. Looking back, throughout all my life, the most important person and thing in my life was me. I was the most important thing to me. So when it came down to the decisions I made, I wanted to do whatever made me feel good. For the first time, Megan was more important to me than myself. So that was a big shift. We still had trials and tribulations with me and drinking, but we started to do work that really helped me reprogram my subconscious mind. She introduced me to meditation. She introduced me to affirmations, which I didn't know what the heck those were. I didn't know what the law of attraction was at all. I watched The Secret. She introduced me all these tools that made me kind of open my eyes to how my mind works, and then how to actually apply them to reprogramming my subconscious mind, which is where a lot of the decisions I was making were sitting. And I got to back up for a quick second. So one of the things that did happen, and man, addiction can just tear families apart for multiple reasons. I've always been very close with my family, particularly my father. And when I started experimenting with psychedelics, I posted, there was some kind of Facebook thing where I was going to a Burning Man event or something, and my dad found out, and, he sat me down, he asked to have lunch, he sent me down and talked to me, and he was like, hey, are you experimenting with psychedelics? He straight up asked me. And at this point, one thing that happens sometimes, and it happened to me when you start experimenting with psychedelics, and you're doing it as a tool and using it with good intention. In a way, you try and I became where I wanted to try and be my best self, and that also means being totally transparent and honest. The one part of me when my father asked me that was thinking, just lie to him. He's going to go crazy about it. He's super conservative, super conditioned, and doesn't. He thinks all drugs are the same. Don't do it. But the other part of me was like, no, I want to have a change in my life, a big part of my life. I want to be totally ethical. I want to do things the right way from now on. So I told him, yes, I am experimenting with psychedelics, but it's been such a beautiful experience. It's helped me in this way. It's helped me in that way. And unfortunately, he just saw red. He literally just saw red. And, my dad and I have always had such an incredible relationship. He's been my mentor for, all my life. And it was very difficult because at that point, in his words, heroin is just as bad as LSD or mushrooms. And for anyone that has familiarity or studied or knows stuff about psychedelics, it couldn't be more incorrect. But and I'm not trying to trash him by any means. He truly was just trying to do the best he could with the knowledge that he had and the experience that he had. But he was very convinced that I was just becoming addicted to psychedelics. So cut me off from the family, told all my family that I was deep into drugs, and half my family cut me off because they thought I was just going down this horrible, crazy path. When the unfortunate thing was I was never at that point, I had never been in a better, more healthy state of mind. And again, I'm not dragging on him for it. He was just doing what he thought was right for him and his family because he thought I was just doing more damage to myself and going down a bad path. So just an example of how addiction can there's so many ways it can begin to tear a family apart. But that happened with the psychedelics, and then coming back to Megan, we started doing all of this mind work. We started doing she got me into meditation. She got me into gratitude writing, affirmation. She has this, we spoke about it earlier, meditate and affirmate, which is basically this morning routine that involves doing a meditation and going and writing what you're grateful for, and then writing your affirmations of what you want to create in your life, setting an intention. And through Megan and through, psychedelics were a piece of it, I also ended up growing a very powerful relationship with my creator, God. That was a huge part of it as well. It's not that I didn't believe in God. I self-admittedly thought I was too logical for most of my life because I was like, I have to know. How do I ever know? Which is pretty ridiculous for me anyway now. But experimenting with psychedelics, understanding that there's so much more going on around us, starting the meditations, starting to reprogram my subconscious mind, and then really heavily focusing on what I wanted to create in my life rather than what I wanted to let go of, really started to make a shift. I realized I was doing things completely wrong. And I was, a lot of people count the days that they're sober. The problem for me was because I was counting the days I was sober and I was thinking about not drinking every day, it was causing me to focus on drinking, which attracted more of it into my life. So there were so many reasons that I felt I was going wrong for myself. And through psychedelic experimentation, Megan, and actually having someone that was more important to me than myself, and then that relationship with God, the shift finally happened. It finally happened. And I just stopped drinking. I can't even tell you the exact day I stopped drinking on because of how it worked in my mind, to where I didn't even focus on the fact that I wasn't drinking. I focused on the fact that I wanted to create an incredible life with Megan, that I wanted us to have a wonderful marriage, that I wanted to start a company with her, that I wanted to do all of these things that were good. And then I wanted to be a great disciple of Christ. I wanted to be a child of God and be an example of a child of God, and it didn't add up to want to do all that and then still make the decisions I was making with alcohol. So to sum it up, what really worked for me and my formula, I guess you can call it, is first, the person that has the addiction needs to have something that is more important to them than themselves. Something, whatever that could be, whether that's a relationship, whether that's, a higher power, whatever it is, there has to be something that's more important to them than just their own immediate gratification. 2, what worked for me is a program that will help reprogram your subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind runs 95% of our day. 95% of our day. And most people don't realize what you put into your conscious mind, the things you think, the people you listen to, the sounds like music, all of that, that goes into your conscious mind and it reprograms your subconscious mind. So it's incredibly, what outworked for me is this work that in the mornings and evenings, constantly reprogramming my subconscious mind for positivity, for empowerment, for healthy habits, healthy organs, all of that. So first, something that's more important to them than their immediate gratification, than yourself. 2, a program that'll reprogram your subconscious mind, begin to reprogram your subconscious mind. I highly recommend meditation and affirmations, gratitude writing, just constantly putting good, empowering stuff in your subconscious mind. And man, utilize that law of attraction to the fullest degree. I mean, it has been a game changer for me in my life once I truly understood the law of attraction and how it's literally working, whether you use it to your advantage or not. I mean, if you whatever you're focusing on, you're going to experience more in your life. And it's really interesting. There was a big post that Mark Metry made, not to go off too much, but about the part of your brain, the reticular, I think it's called the reticular activating part of your brain, the front. It literally looks for and confirms whatever your beliefs are. So you are literally attracting whatever you believe you're going to see. So that's part of it too. But utilizing the law of attraction to your fullest degree. Those are the 3 things that really worked for me. So again, just to recap, that's how I healed. That's how I healed my addiction. I've been sober for years now. I honestly couldn't tell you which day I stopped drinking on because I never focused on it. And it sounds crazy, but I have no urge whatsoever, at all. There was a process when I first stopped where there were urges here and there, but then I just refocused on what I wanted to create in my life. I went back to my affirmations. I decided to focus on something else. And over time, your mind literally reprograms. So find something that's more important than yourself, that's, or whether it's your purpose, higher power, whatever. Reprogram your subconscious mind. It's not immediate, but you can do it, and then utilize that law of attraction. That's what worked for me. Again, I'm not saying that other ways don't do it, other ways don't work, but that's how I was able to heal my mind and rid myself of this alcohol addiction that literally plagued my life for 28 of my 32 years on this earth. And there's no doubt in my mind that I'm just not going to drink again. I spent years trying to convince myself that I could just have 1 or 2 drinks. But once I came to that conclusion and really shifted my priorities and went deep into my mind, it became a no-brainer, no pun intended. But anyway, thank you guys for all listening to me. Always, if anyone has any comments, questions, feel free to shoot me a message directly. I feel a lot of my purpose of healing has to do with addiction, and I very much feel for it as I've experienced it, and I've experienced the carnage that it can cause on a family firsthand. So I'm very sympathetic towards it, and just know, don't fear judgment. Don't fear judgment of it. We all have issues. No one's perfect. The first step to changing something is becoming powerfully self-aware about it, knowing you need to make a change, and then look for those signs and make that change. I need to give one quick shout out to James Hadlock too. He's the CEO of Blue Novus. He's doing some incredible, beautiful work in the addiction space, because as he knows too, addiction's gone about and stigmatized so much in the workplace nowadays. He's changing the game. So anyone that wants to see any kind of a good work being done in the addiction world, check out James Hadlock. But thank you all for listening. Megan, did you have any parting words or any advice for anyone that might be dealing with addiction, or anyone that knows any family or friends dealing with addiction?
No, I mean, for me, you already hit on everything. The mindset stuff, for me, that's so huge, because it goes back to how it changed, my life. But it's amazing that it can be done because, you know, you are such a different person, you know, and you did get jealous over things for no reason, you know, when you would drink and you would be a different person and you're such an amazing person and you did do it on your own. You didn't need that, you know, those programs, you know, and you didn't focus, you know, what you focus on, you attract. And it's crazy that they have you focus on like alcohol, you know? And so to me, yeah, it makes sense that that wouldn't work, you know? And so it goes back to, you know, taking your focus off of what is, you know, what you don't no longer, you know, want in your life and placing it upon something that you do want, but that desire just has to be stronger, you know? And you know, I feel like if you have a strong desire to quit the addiction, that strong desire can be at such a high vibrational frequency that it can help shift things, you know, and put things into motion. So again, it goes back to, you know, your thoughts and your mindset.
Awesome, thanks. And I want to actually make one quick correction. The first thing you need is something that's more important to you than drinking. Something that's more important to you than drinking, not necessarily yourself. You can be really important to yourself, but something that's a bit more important to you than drinking, and then something to reprogram and beginning to reprogram your subconscious mind, and then heavily utilizing the law of attraction, just to clarify that. Thank you, Megan. Thanks for being on here listening in. She's been a trooper, and I don't know where I'd be without her. So she is my absolute world and helped me have that relationship with God and taught me all these incredible things about my mind. So thank you again, Megan. Thank you for anyone listening in for listening to me. And again, you know, we're all in this together. We're all connected. I have love for every single one of you out there. If you're going through it and you're struggling, you have hope. You can heal. Hang on. You can make it happen. Have a great rest of y'all's day or night.
Happy healing.
Happy healing.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.